Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of The Monster's Den. Today, we're going to take a look at another favorite of mine from the vaults. All right, 1932's Universal Pictures' The Mummy. All right, this here is the Blu-ray edition of the film. I've had this in many iterations over the year. I remember growing up as a kid watching this on television, black and white television, whenever it came on. Okay, then eventually, over the years, picked it up on VHS, got it on DVD, had it on Blu-ray a couple times. I bought the big Universal monster giant pack with all 32 films on them, and that's what I have here. This is one of the many films in that set, but a favorite of mine features one of my all-time favorite horror actors, Mr. Boris Karloff, okay, alongside Bela Lugosi, two geniuses of the genre who went on to star in so many notable pictures over the years. And The Mummy, fresh off of his success in Frankenstein, Mr. Karloff was already a big deal. Didn't take him long, right? Of course, he had been kind of like a struggling actor, appearing in tons of films before Frankenstein, but it was the Frankenstein film that really put him on the map and then led him to get the title role in The Mummy. Produced by Carl Laemmle Jr., okay, of course, who was producing a lot of the films for Universal in those days, directed by Carl Freund, and made on a budget of $196,000. Just think about that. $196,000. And very kind of creepy atmospheric picture. Not so much a horror film. It is to an extent, but it's more about the kind of long-lost love. Part of it's like, it's basically a romance story, all right, across the ages with horror elements is kind of what it is. But a very kind of atmospheric and creepy film, I think, with a great performance by Boris Karloff and a bunch of the folks that are also in the film. So you've got Karloff himself playing Ardeth Bay, otherwise known as Imhotep, okay. You've got Zita Johann, plays Helen Grosner, okay, also Princess Oxananen. All right, you've got David Manners as Frank Wemple. David Manners is showing up in a lot of these films right around that time. You got the always great Edward Van Sloan, who plays Dr. Mueller, and Arthur Byron, who plays Sir Joseph Wemple. Okay, so that's the main cast of the film. So basically, my favorite part of the film is the beginning. I mean, I like various parts of the film a lot, but I mean, the beginning is kind of the best. So it goes back in time to 1921, where you have an Egyptian expedition going on, and the crew, a bunch of scientists, right? They find the ancient mummy, okay, in these ruins, and that's basically what you got here. I mean, this is, obviously Karloff only really portrays that look of the mummy in the very beginning of the film. So he's basically the open casket, okay, or coffin, sarcophagus, whatever you want to call it. And there he is lying there, with the eyes closed with all the bandages, looking pretty damn creepy. I think he looks fantastic here. The makeup was great and the costume was great. And basically, they start reading from the scrolls, these ancient scrolls and what have you. And then, they've got a bunch of guys in there. They're chit-chatting. The coffin is open. Okay, Karloff is there as the mummy, the Imhotep, right? And then after they start reading the scrolls, okay, all of a sudden, middle of the night, one of them is hanging out in the room where the mummy is, and then all of a sudden, the mummy just walks out of the coffin and walks out of the room, and the guy who's in there is like completely freaked out, and he starts screaming hysterically. He's gone completely mad, right? So basically the coffin had a curse on it, okay? As we find out later on, Imhotep was actually buried alive in that coffin. It's a whole story about forbidden love. So he was actually in love with the Princess Oxananen, right? And when they found that out, it's like, no, you can't make this happen with her. She perished. Okay, he wanted to bring her back to life. That was actually forbidden. So when they found this out, okay, they basically put him to death to be buried alive. So alive, they captured him, and put the bandages on him, put him in the coffin. That was it. All right. Till now, brought back to life. So the Scroll of Thoth, or Thoth, however they say that. That's the ancient scrolls. Okay, so 10 years later, then we fast forward to 1931. Imhotep shows up as this character called Ardeth Bay, a creepy, tall, creepy guy, Egyptian-looking guy. You know, he's got the hat and the real kind of waxy, but almost look like caked-on skin. All right, he's wearing the whole outfit and all this kind of stuff, and he's actually looking for the princess's tomb. All right, comes across, you know, all these other characters that we mentioned. You've got Helen and her father and Dr. Mueller, Edward Van Sloan. Okay, so he actually winds up seeing Helen Grosvenor, and he's amazed because she looks exactly like his former love, Princess Oxynanen, right? So now he goes through this the whole movie is basically him trying to win her over, okay? And she knows there's something going on with this guy. She's like, man, it's like he's got this, he's like trying to take control of her, right? But his goal is he wants to capture her, kill her, bring her back as his long lost love, the Princess Oxynanen, right? And then make her his bride. So that's kind of like the whole theme of the entire film, is this whole process where Ardeth Bay is trying to capture her and put her under kind of his spell, so he can then, kill her, bring her back to life as his bride, as his former love, right? And I think that one of the things that is so great about this film, and kind of what Universal did quite a lot with their horror stars back in those days, is they love to inject these like close-up shots of either Karloff here in this film, or in Frankenstein, or Lugosi in Dracula. These close-up shots, okay, where the eyes are kind of like lit, this menacing stare, and they did it so well throughout this whole movie. And I think Karloff did a great job of playing this character that was like really low-key, very soft-spoken, but with carrying that hint of menace. And they would always show those penetrating eyes, and they did that throughout this film to really, really great effect. So, the whole, they talk a lot about the goddess of Isis in this film, okay, and how, Imhotep is like, always praying to the goddess of Isis, but when he finally does capture Helen and wants to actually kill her, okay, she breaks away from him and starts pleading with the goddess of Isis, right? Please help me, right? So all of a sudden the goddess kind of sort of comes to life. And it's like basically like a statue, right? But all of a sudden comes to life and shoots like this flame or this ray or something, and it goes, and the scroll of Thoth is actually there, and it goes and it destroys the scroll. As soon as that happens, Imhotep, or Ardeth Bay, whatever you want to call him, basically crumbles to dust, okay? That's kind of like the end of the film. But one thing I did want to mention, there is another great kind of confrontation in this film, which is very similar to what we saw and talked about last week in the Dracula film, between Edward Van Sloan's character, and in this case, Boris Karloff as Imhotep, or Ardeth Bay, okay, where he's trying to inject his will over Edward Van Sloan's character, Dr. Mueller, okay? And it's very, very similar to the exact scene that happened between Van Helsing and Dracula in the other film. Very, very similar. I think they used Edward Van Sloan a lot in these films to be that kind of elder statesman, very smart, kind of scientist professor type of character who was very knowledgeable. And throughout, even in this film, he eventually finds out, he finds out who Ardeth Bay is. And the whole rest of the film, we need to destroy this creature, okay, because he's going to wreak havoc and all this kind of stuff. So it's very similar to the Dracula film in that, he's the first one to kind of figure this whole thing out. And then they come up with a plan to get rid of the mummy character, Imhotep, all right, Ardeth Bay, whatever you want to call him. But in the end, it's actually Helen pleading to the goddess of Isis, all right, to actually prove his undoing. So some really, really cool stuff, and I think some really good cinematography in this film. I think also when they do the kind of look back and show you actually what happened to Imhotep back in the old days. About, they show like a whole like kind of dream sequence where he's remembering what happened and how he tried to bring the princess back to life and how they caught him. And then they show, them, like I said, tying him all up, putting him in the coffin, taking him out and burying him alive. And it's actually very, very well done. And they would actually use in subsequent sequels to this film, which hopefully we'll cover at some point too down the line. They used a lot of stock footage from this first film in the, Curse of the Mummy and the Mummy's Tomb and, all those other mummy films that came after, because there's a whole bunch of them. So we got, not Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. So we got The Mummy's Hand, Curse of the Mummy's Tomb is Hammer. Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Tomb, Mummy's Ghost, The Mummy's Cursed. They use stock footage from this film in a lot of those other films, which in those films they mostly based it on the mummy, who stayed as a mummy, aimlessly walking around killing machine throughout the whole film. Where here, the only time you see Karloff as in the mummy garb is in the very beginning of the film. The rest of the film, he's in fact, if you haven't seen it, okay, that's him right there, looking all sorts of creepy. But a very good film, and like I said, also a film that had some really cool music in the beginning, kind of splattered throughout. Some of the acting by the cast a little over the top. I think Zita Johann, her acting, a little over the top. Some people love David Manner, some people don't. Okay, I think Arthur Byron does a fine job in this film as her father, and Edward Van Sloan, as always, is terrific. But I think the main guy in this film obviously is Boris Karloff, and I think he just does a great job portraying that kind of hidden menace. But he also has this air about him, like he's got all the knowledge of being around for centuries, right? But he's got all this stuff pent up in him, and he's got a plan, and he wants to see it to fruition, right? As soon as he sees Helen and is like, she is my long lost princess, my love, there's nothing's going to stop him getting where he wants to get, right? And in the end, it doesn't really work out. So a fantastic film that I think gets better and better with age. Again, it's different. It's different from a lot of the other Universal films. We have like supernatural creatures, okay, and actual monsters or man-created monsters. Here, it's just basically an ancient ancient Egyptian curses and mythology and all that kind of stuff, and coming back from the dead and all that sort of thing. So very, very cool. A great performance by Boris Karloff. So we're going to be talking a lot more in future episodes about Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi and a lot of the great roles that he did, as well as Lon Chaney Jr. All right. And we're going to try and get to the silent stuff as well. You're gonna get 2 episodes this weekend. I figure I'd throw that out there right now. So you're actually going to get also a Hammer film either later today or tomorrow. Okay, we're going to tackle Curse of the Werewolf. Okay, another great horror film from yesterday, from one of my favorite film studios, Hammer. Love the Hammer films, and so I'm going to be doing an episode for that as well. So hope you enjoyed this. If you haven't seen The Mummy from 1932, I highly recommend you go check it out. And if you have seen it, maybe it's a good time to rewatch it again. But let's curious to see what your thoughts are on The Mummy, what you think of this film, what are some of your opinions and factoids and all that kind of stuff. But I think another fine film from Universal, among their like early greats. They got a handful of ones that are just like little head and shoulders above the rest. This is one of them. So visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time, and at least once a week with The Monster's Den. If you haven't seen last week's episode on Dracula starring Bela Lugosi, I urge you to check it out. But also stay tuned this weekend, as we'll also be diving into Hammer's Curse of the Werewolf starring Oliver Reed. So check that out when it comes on, and we'll see you guys soon. All right, take care. Bye-bye.